Those of you that have already signed on, welcome to the what are we in the August? Welcome to the August Landscape Inspectors membership meeting. Thank you for attending. The chat box is open, so both speakers will allow questions to come in. We'll be monitoring the questions from here and ask appropriately. If it's about an individual slide, we will request right away. It says my voice is fading in and out, which isn't the first we've heard of that. But hopefully it's going to get better. I'm glad to say when we checked with both speakers, their systems were working well. So it may just be me, but thank you, Rose. Again, the chat box is open. You'll be able to ask questions, and there will be a Q&A session at the end of each of the presentations. But along the way, if there's something you need to specifically ask about before a slide goes away, or when Beth is doing her presentation, if you particularly want to say, could you do that again kind of idea, then feel free to put that in the chat box, and where appropriate, we will interrupt the speaker or make sure they follow through on that. One of the things we'll have in between the primary presenters, we've left room for Mike for the minute for Mike, since we haven't been keeping up with that. So at about somewhere between 10 and 5 before the top of next hour, then we will open it up. We'll bring Mike Orfanides in, and possibly Donna Torrey as well, to tell you a little bit about what's going on through the extension service. Same thing, if people have certain announcements of things that you want, again, feel free to put them in the chat box. I'm trying to leave some time in there for those kind of notifications, other association meetings, things along those lines. I think at the end. Hi, Donna. So I guess Donna's going to be covering for Mike. Other things while we're going, and we'll try and make it fit, Donna. Couple things we've got going. One, the year is fast, sailing right by us at a tremendously quick clip. We are planning in the late planning stages of the seminar, the 2021 seminar. We've got a board meeting today that we're going to be putting together some of the ideas and things. It's going to be 2 half-day sessions. The first one will be via Zoom, and the second one will be at a park. So that way we can still remain socially distanced, et cetera, and in honor of COVID and keeping everybody safe. So that will be hitting the screens pretty fast. And once it does, we ask that you all respond very quickly. And those of you that have been good enough to be sponsors in the past, again, we'd like to encourage you or ask you to be a sponsor again this year, and work with us as COVID has disrupted everybody's life for the past, what's it been, 10 years now, but hopefully not much more going forward. Those of you that are interested, as the year is coming down, we will be having elections for the general board, the executive board, upcoming for next year. So people that are interested in getting more active with the association, please start, reach out to us, send us your email, send us your bio, et cetera, et cetera. Let us know that you are interested in becoming more active. There are a lot of changes coming up in the new year, not the least of which on a personal level is I am retiring. I've got, I think, 138 days or something left with the city of Sunrise, and then I will can't work past that date. It's a program we have. I've been actually retired for the past 6 years. The drop program, for those of you from other municipalities that are aware of it, which allows you to remain or re-employed for a time period. Well, that time period wears out at 145 days, so I will be retiring and leaving there. So a couple things along that line. At some point, there will be a job posted that I highly recommend for anyone or everyone that I've held for the past 17 years. Love it. So, you know, that job posting will be hitting the street at some point, and it's open to any and all. I would encourage you to there will be some changes for LIAF next year, not as dramatic as you would think. I'm planning on staying on a while longer, so I think we'll still make all this work. And LIAF has come a long way with your all's assistance and the executive board. We've accomplished a lot. Even COVID hasn't. I think we're going to continue, and we've got some even bigger plans for the upcoming year. Let me read these real quick. Water Matters Day is set for October 16th. Wow. A giveaway, and that's coming from Rose. Good, Rose, I'm glad to see some things are remaining or returning to normal to some degree. That's great news. That's great news. And I see I'm still getting, I'll scoot closer, but pretty soon we're going to be very intimate. I understand the speaker here may not be working all that well. All right. That being said, then, Miss Beth, what I think I'll do is I will bring you on, since you're working fine, and they won't have to hear in and out. All right. In all fair disclosure, Beth has been a friend of the family forever.
I not touch it?
That would be fair to say. But in the meantime, in addition to watching Beth grow up, she's become quite a professional. So I'm going to read her bio, which is Beth. And Beth, I would tear up your new last name because I still know you as Bly. So the former Miss Beth Bly has been teaching New York City Department of Education since 2015. She's a graduate from Lehman College with a BA in geology and an MS and a master's in education in secondary science education. She now teaches high school computer science and works on curriculum development. Beth is going to be teaching us today about some basic computer skills. So what we are going to do, in addition to turn it over to her, you all will need to be watching your screens and asking questions in the chat box if you need more additional questions. So that being said, Beth, I'm going to turn it over to you as soon as Richard tells me how to get me off.
You don't remember?
Stop video?
No, you're good. I can just take over. I can take over.
Nicely done.
There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. I am just going to jump in and share my screen because there's a bunch of information on there rather than just looking at me. So here we go. All right. Okay. So this portion of your meeting is, Bill has coined it as green tech. And today my job is to make you a little bit more savvy in computing, okay? I do all sorts of levels of computing, and I will sort of run through that in just a second. In the chat, so Bill, I don't know who's monitoring the chat, but my screen's a little small, so if something pops in the chat, if someone could just let me know if I need to answer it, that'd be great. So we already ran through this. My name is Beth, and the last name is Portocarrero. A lot of people have trouble with it. So my job this week is to help you, or this month I should say, is to become more tech savvy. That's just some of my contact information, my email, there's Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, like all of that is there. And Bill already went through this. I started out with a degree in geology and science education, teaching in the New York City Department of Ed as an earth science teacher. I took a workshop for, 3 days in coding and computer science. And now I no longer teach earth science. I am a full-time computer science teacher, and I teach all the computer science levels from 9 through 12 in my school. So this is what we're going to try and run through today. We'll see how much, if we are able to. Everything that in terms of like screenshots that I took or that I'm going to show you on my computer is my Mac is going to be running off the operating system Catalina. And then anything else with screenshots was based off of Windows 10. Okay, so if you don't have Windows 10, it might look a little different, but the basics and the steps are pretty much the same for all of it. The newest operating system for Mac, I think, is Big Sur. But depending on how old your computer is, you might not be able to upgrade to that point. So I'm going to run through the best way to do like a split screen, especially if you have to follow along with whether it's what's going on Zoom or someone's website at the same time, running through like startup and shutdown of your computer, updates, whether it is for your computer or for maybe Zoom or any other app that you might have, any information on changing any types of settings on your computer, how to add or change users on your computer. So when like you log into your computer, what would be happening? Talk about passwords, some keyboard shortcuts, and file management in terms of just keeping it as organized as possible. All right, so if I'm talking too fast, please let me know. It's a habit I have. If you don't understand anything, also let me know. And if you need me to repeat anything that I've gone through on the screen, feel free to drop it in the chat, and that way we will know exactly what I need to repeat. All right, so here we go. So best setup when you're trying to follow along. So if you were following, if I keep the slides up the whole time, or you had like a website that you wanted to follow, plus you wanted your Zoom screen, there's a very simple way to do it on a Mac and a PC. So just to clarify before the IT department yells at me again about this, when I say PC, yes, they are all personal computers, but Mac is just, everyone knows Apple and Mac, and then PC could be anything. It could be any brand other than a Mac. So when I say PC, that's what I mean. So really easy when you are on a Macintosh computer, an Apple. Most of this I'm talking about for a laptop or a desktop. On a tablet, things get a little different when you switch over to like an iPad. So on the top left corner, you have 3 buttons. You have a green, a yellow, and a red. And if you hover over the green, you get these 3 options of full screen, left side of the screen, and right side of the screen, which then allows you to pick from your windows what you're going to do. So what it's going to look a little crazy right now because I'm going to share my whole desktop screen. So that way you guys have an idea. Just a moment. Can I share? Oh, it doesn't seem like I have the option. All right, so we'll just do this. Let's see if it'll work. Can you guys still see everything on my screen or?
Yes.
Okay, so it's just the slides right now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I don't want to go full screen. Let's see if it's going to let me do it.
Is it possible you only have, the browser window shared?
Yeah, the problem is it's not giving me the option to do my whole desktop when I try and share. Yeah.
Can you unshare that first and then try it?
Let me check, see if that'll work. Nope. Still don't have that option. Advanced, new. That's all right. We'll work with it. So this might be an issue then. Hold on. Why?
I think Zoom might have changed something because I don't see it on mine either.
It's not even under the advanced.
That is so weird.
Why can't you? Dropbox. Huh.
Your computer, you can't. I wonder if it's in the options somewhere where it doesn't have access to your whole screen.
Got it. So
I'm actually looking for that myself online.
advanced.
Where is that? Security and privacy. Security. Hey, look, we're all learning something.
Right? Yeah. So I can tell you, there's normally the option, but recently Zoom has updated. So like we were saying, that could be one of the things that it did.
Yeah, Zoom did a few different things. I think that's why Bill's audio is a little on and off, because I think they changed the ambient sound. Let's see Zoom in here now.
While you're searching, I have to tell you, Beth,
Mhm.
people are enjoying the fact that experts also struggle with computers.
Yeah, I saw that, which it happens all the time.
So weird because I see it's like on mine, I see that I have everything checked to allow it.
But when you go to share, it's only
Yeah.
Windows, right?
Yeah. There's screen recording is allowed from Zoom. Zoom's got full disk access, not that that should matter.
Okay, let's see.
Because the speakers are too close to the microphone.
Yeah.
I
All
don't know
right.
where the microphone is over there, but
Yeah.
are you sure you're muted?
Okay, so on
Oh.
your end, if you're still trying to figure this out, I can just sort of mimic it a little bit. 'Cause
Yeah,
I did screenshots, so.
I was gonna say if you're going to like system preferences or something, just open it up and then share it from there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, as you can all see, even those of us that teach the technology, it decides that it's going to update something, and what you thought was there is no longer there. So when you are trying to, I can show you up here, if you hover over your green little button right here, you have the three options of full screen, left side or right side. And if I were to click on the left side, it will take this tab that I'm in right now, this window of Google Chrome, and it will put it half on the, I'm sorry, on the left-hand side of my screen. And then it will give me on the right-hand side of my screen all the other applications and windows that I've opened. And I can pick any of those that I want. Now, it's an awesome feature. It works as well on the iPad, which I know is great. And this is an excellent thing when you're trying to go back and forth, like copying from one document to another without having to switch between tabs. You can have two small screens, and depending on what device you're working on, you know, if you're on a desktop where your screen is twice the size of a laptop, it can be amazing. Or if you're someone that has maybe two monitors, it's also great. And you can choose either left or right, whichever you want. I will say that when you're running off Windows, they don't do it with the option of the buttons. You actually just take the whole window and you drag it to either the bottom right or the bottom left. And then it will ask you where you want to populate the window. And when you're running off Windows, you actually have the option of, you can split it into 3 different sections. I'm not sure how many, if it'll go up to 4 or more. Anything for PC is just stuff I've learned along the way. Most of my knowledge is going to be working with Apple devices and the Mac system. So, yeah, so this is great, especially when you're trying to, like, if you're someone who's running a Zoom, this works out great for my end. Being a teacher, I'm able to have like whatever I'm showing students plus my Zoom opening on the other half, and, you know, other windows like the chat and the participants window and stuff like that. All right, so we're just going to start off real simple with startup and shutdown. And when you're talking about your computer, the 2 major buttons or icons that you're going to see on your screen, if you are running a Mac, it's going to be the Apple icon in the top left. And if you are running a Windows device, it is going to be on the bottom left-hand side. Okay. And these two, the Windows option or that menu has a lot more options than the Apple one does. But your Apple will give you the basics. So let me see if I did. I think I did all right. So on the top left, and you guys can follow along with this, we're not going to do anything that really changes, but the Apple menu is not going to be able to show right now just because of this not showing your desktop. If you click on your Apple, you'll find things like about your Macintosh, which is where you're going to find, just the basic information of it, meaning like how much memory does it have and what operating system is it running. And that's also, let's see if I open that window, it might let me share it. Let's try. There we go. We'll just do little by little, baby steps. So when you click on the Apple and you do about your Mac, this is what you're going to get. It's going to tell you what version you are running of your system, how much memory, things like that, the displays that you have. So this is, I'm working off of the one monitor. This would be a spot where you can see if you have two monitors that you're trying to, sort of connect as one giant monitor, your storage, your memory, support, and service. But in your overview right here is a really great one for software update. Let's see if it will switch windows. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep grabbing new windows. There we go. So your software update, this one tells me that my Mac is up to date on Catalina. And I checked it this morning to make sure there were no issues. So this right here, you have advanced, but you have this little blue button that you can check that says automatically keep my Mac up to date. And if you're someone who forgets to update a lot of your apps, that can be a really good one for you, especially you can have it do it like overnight. You can set it up when to remind you and things like that. So that way, when you're done at the end of the day, it can do all the updates at night. And then, just like if you have iPhones, it does the same thing where you have to be like connected to a power system. So when it's charging, and then it will update for you. If you have an Apple Watch, it does the same thing. So those are things that you can look for to make sure that it is kept up to date. If you don't want it to automatically do the updates, you can just uncheck that box, and then it'll ask you, sure you want to turn it off, and so on. They'll ask you probably 20 times with everything you try and change. So with let's see, with the Windows, it's going to be the same thing in terms of on your Windows little icon that you open, you're going to have like settings, and in your settings is where you're going to find things like your updates and so on. So let's go back to the slides. And in your Apple and your Windows, you're going to find things like power off and restart. So I will say very rarely do I ever have to restart my computer. It could be if it freezes for some random reason, but usually the one I use the most is sleep. So when I'm done at night on my computer, I just put it to sleep, and it's sort of an energy saver. And then I can close my laptop, or my desktop will just go dark. It won't have any kind of screensaver running on it. It'll just be a black screen. And to wake it up, you just press a key or move your mouse, and your computer will wake up. It didn't fully shut down. So if you choose to fully shut down your computer, I would go to the shutdown. If you close the lid, that's fine. You can, it'll put it to sleep as well. It's a habit to go to the sleep menu, especially if the one thing is, if you're working on a computer that might have more than one login. So if you share, say, a family computer, right? Or at school, I have mine where I log in under my personal information. So I always go and I log out of it and like make sure that if someone's going to use my computer, they have to have their own username and password. Yes, when you do updates, it will tell you that you might need to restart it, or it restarts on its own. Those are one of the few instances that you would restart the computer. So you can shut down your computer, which is fine. To restart your computer, there's usually a power button on your computer that will start it up. Those are various ways to shut down and restart. But like I said, a lot of people, it's just best, especially if you use your computer first thing in the morning and it's in the same spot all the time. You're not like carrying it anywhere. Just put it to sleep, close your lid, or, walk away from your desktop, and you can just start it up the next morning. There's the lock screen also, where it would bring you back to having multiple users. With Windows and with the Mac operating system, you can have one device, but you can have multiple users on it. So the computer I'm working on right now is one from the Department of Education. So they have their like admin login, and then I have my own. And then at home, I have one for myself, for my husband, for my daughter. And that way, when you have the different setups, you don't have to worry about changing settings every time. One that's really key is like for your mouse, if you have a trackpad mouse, which is like instead of a regular mouse, it's just a flat pad that you run your fingers up, down, side to side. You can change, just like on a regular mouse, you can change which way it scrolls. So if you scroll, if you push the scroll up, does it make your pages go up or does it make them go down, or vice versa? And my husband and I use them opposite. So when you log onto my computer, it's one way. And when you my username, when you log under his, it's the opposite direction. So all those little settings, backgrounds, colors, themes, all of that can be different from user to user. Let me see if there's anything else in this menu. I think we are good there. You'll also see in the Apple menu, the force quit button, which could be if an application that you're running just is continually thinking over and over, you might have to force quit it, which it's just, you're forcing it to actually quit and shut down, and you'll have to restart it. All right. Yeah, so there's all sorts of settings that you can go through to personalize whatever computer you're using, whether it is the theme colors that you use, whether it is what your default browser is. So when you buy a Mac, the default is Safari. My hierarchy is Safari is like never my choice. I always go with Google Chrome. So Google Chrome is something I have to download to use, as a web browser. And then I default so that everything I open will use Google Chrome. It won't ever default to Safari. So there's all sorts of things. You can double click on different menus. My key phrase that I use with my students, adults, everyone that I go through all of this with is work smarter, not harder. The less I have to reach for my mouse and I can do off the keyboard, or the less that I have to manipulate as I'm going through, that's just automatically set up for me, is going to make my life so much easier. Okay. So talking about updates and settings, these are what the two different menus will look like. You'll see that a lot of the screenshots that I took from my computer, I have everything set up for a dark theme. So the theme is usually like either you have the white background or the dark gray background. Some of the applications out there give you multiple colors that you can choose from. I know that Google Chrome just did an update that you can now, you can have multiple users synced in. So if you see my little icon up here, that's my personal one, but I can also have my school one running at the same time, and you can pick different colors for it as well. So I always have the dark theme on mine. My eyes are very light, so the really white background like bothers me after being on the computer for a while. So that's why it might look different if you have a Mac compared to mine. So I'm going to open this up on my Mac in just a second, but this is system preferences. Okay, that's what they call it on a Mac. And then on a PC, or I should say running Windows, it's just going to be settings, which for them, it's the little gear icon. So let's do a new share and we will open up system preferences. All right, so here is system preferences on a Mac. You'll see that with Macs, you will have to log in with your Apple ID. And the same thing, Microsoft Windows will try and force you to do the same thing. There are ways to get around it where you can just keep denying it and just log in with, whatever your personal email is. You don't have to sign up with a Windows email. So it has me logged in here. I like this for the fact that all my devices are logged in with the same ID. So therefore everything is synced and I can move things from device to device without actually having to like send it as an email or an attachment. So here you're going to find your system preferences, just like in settings on a Windows operating machine. You'll see your general, your desktop, like what you want it to look like, any kind of software updates, if you're Bluetooth connecting something. So if you have like headphones, you just got a new pair of Bluetooth headphones, that's the way you would do it. Setting up your printers. your keyboard, your mouse, all of that, your energy saver, how it's displayed. These are where you could actually set up for your computer to like wake up and shut down and like go to sleep at certain times throughout the day. If you have the Windows has the same thing where you can set up different options for when it will wake up and be put to sleep throughout the day. You have things like screen time if you ever want to see how much time you're spending on your device and what applications you're actually using. And screen time for Mac is across all devices. I'm not sure Windows probably might have their own version of it as well. Let's see if there's anything else. So the next thing I would say is I'm just going to show you, I updated Zoom this morning and I took screenshots as it goes through. So it's very similar what I show you on the Mac versus the PC or anything operating on Windows. They just might call it something different. But if you look, the general setup of them is very, very similar. Okay, so the Microsoft ones might be in the family settings. Also in here, you could set up, if you are sharing, if you're sharing your device or your laptop or whatever it might be with a family member, with a child, someone that you want to limit what they're able to access on their computer under their user, we'll go through that. But you can set up times that, students or your children or whoever's using the device is allowed to use it. So there's all these sort of settings. It's just how much you want to actually customize for yourself. Okay, so let's jump back to the slides because it's hard to show you an update in real time. So when Zoom updated this morning, I just took screenshots and went through to show you what it would look like. So step number one is first, once I logged out of Zoom this morning, and this happens, it could happen two different ways with whatever application you're using. One, when you close out of your application, or your application might give you like a notification that you need to update. Some of them you might actually have to go into top menu where it says like file, edit, view, and so on, where the name of the application is. You might have to look there for the updates as well. Not all of them will let you know that the updates are happening. One that I see the most often that people don't update, I'm running off Google Chrome right now. On the top right in Google Chrome, it will give you like a yellow, I think it's green, yellow, and red is like you're really far behind on your updates. You should really update what's going on. And then yellow, I think, is letting you know like, oh, an update just popped up, and green will let you know that you are fully updated. And Chrome tends to update pretty often. I will say the one thing is when it updates, if it closes everything, once you reopen it, it will ask you, do you want us to restore all of the windows that you just, or the tabs you just had open? And if you're like me, throughout the workday, you go from in the morning having one tab to by the end of the day, you have like 30 tabs open and you forget what you were on. So it'll automatically do that for you. So when you're installing or updating any kind of application on a Mac, it's going to look like this. It brings you to this first window right here that is just telling you to install. Should you read all the fine print? Yes. Does anybody read all the fine print? No, we all know this. So it's all there, the terms of service, the privacy settings, it's all there for you. So once you click continue, the second one is going to ask you, do you want to install the software on the entire computer so like everybody will get it? Or do you only want it installed for you? So maybe it's like an application for work that that your partner, your children, whoever else is on your computer does not need. You can click that it only installs under you. But if it's something like Zoom, or whatever it might be that, if you were installing some sort of like Photoshop, something you want the whole family to have access to, you would just do it across the computer. All right. So the next thing it's going to tell you how much space it's going to use on your computer. Like this computer, I probably have to be a little worried about because it's several years old. If you have an older computer, you might not have as much space, especially if you've been adding applications throughout the years. If you have a newer computer, you probably have a bigger hard drive. So maybe like a 1 terabit or a 2 terabit hard drive. And then there's a lot more space for you to work with. But this will tell you that right now the default setting is it's putting it on the Mac hard drive and how much space it's going to take up. You have the option that you can change it. So maybe you have a specific place that you put all of your applications. Maybe it's an external hard drive, meaning a hard drive that you actually plug into your computer. So if you don't have enough space on your laptop, you can have this external drive that you can put things on. Usually applications you put on your computer, and maybe the external drive would be, say, documents, photos, videos. Yes. So Bill's question is, or if it came from someone else, when it's updated, is it updated across the board? So this is actually the updating process. So when I updated Zoom this morning, it was asking me, like, even though it says install Zoom, it was going through the update process. So just make sure if you have that option that you always keep it, if it's a program that everyone has, that you want to make sure that everyone gets the update. So once it tells you where and how much space it's using, the next thing on the Mac, and I'm sure Windows has the same exact thing or a version of it, but this is saying that something is trying to be installed on your computer and it gives you the username. So usually it's whoever the admin is on your computer. So for me, I have admin privileges on this computer. So the username is there, and then you put in whatever the password is, and you would click to install the software. So if your 10-year-old child tries to install something and they are not on the admin or have admin privileges, they're under their kid account that you made for them, they won't be able to just randomly download and install things. And you can set up a variety of safety checks throughout, depending on the age and how much time and things like that you plan on for other users. Once you put in the password, it'll tell you the installation was successful and you can go ahead and close it out. Some of them will take a lot longer. Zoom was pretty quick. It wasn't installing the whole program or application. It was actually just giving it an update. And it told me before, when I closed Zoom, it said, hey, an update is available. I didn't look through all the changes. I just did it. And probably in there somewhere, it said that it no longer does the desktop. So. All right. Okay. So that is talking about, your settings, doing your updates and so on and so forth. So if you have questions about that, I'm just going to check real quick in the chat and see if anybody has anything pertaining to this. So we have. All right. I didn't read everything, but somebody is mentioning about the cloud. So like with Mac devices, you have iCloud, and then with Windows devices, it's now OneDrive, which they use. And they're great. Everybody loves the cloud because now you don't have to be like physically on a specific device. Just be mindful that the more devices you hook up to that cloud, they're all sharing that same storage space. So if, like for me, if I have a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, a phone, all sharing the same cloud, I'm constantly getting updates that I do not have enough room for it to back up whatever it is. You can go in and you can adjust, and get rid of things, but things that take up the most space, pictures, especially when you are using more high quality. So if you have one of the latest phones that has a higher quality image that it's taking, that's going to take up more space. And videos take up an abundant amount of space too. Absolutely. So you think like, oh, I only have a few videos of, someone in my family doing something, or I was at a practice or a baseball game or whatever, but they start to add up very, very quickly. So things like an external hard drive would be great. The cloud will back it up to a certain point, but then after that, you usually have to buy more storage. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna run through is in the same section of system preferences. In the Mac operating system, it is under system preferences, and for the Windows, it is under settings. And basically it's called users and groups on Mac, and on Windows, it's called accounts. And this would be where you would add more people if you wanted, other users on your computer. I suggest nowadays that everyone just always have, even if it's only your computer, that you have your login. And if I'm not mistaken, I think both operating systems set it up automatically that way now. It's been a while since I've had to start from the beginning with a computer, but you can add more accounts and you can change the accessibility of these accounts and so on. So when you're on a Mac, yeah, you can have guest accounts. So if someone just wants to use, there's a way to set it up where someone could just use your computer and it's very limited. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, the guest account will wipe when they log out, it will set everything back. We do that at the school where the students, when they log in under their student account, it's not an individualized account. They log in, they use the computer. It doesn't matter what they change, what they download, screenshots, whatever they do. When they log out of that, it wipes it clean for me. And then the next student coming in doesn't have all those, whatever documents the last student was using. A big thing when you're using adding users or making any major changes in a Mac operating system is there's this little lock on the bottom here. And when you click on that lock, it will prompt you with whoever the admin is. So on this computer, it's Boss Vader. My IT guy at school thought he was funny when he made my computer for me. So mine is admin. I put in my password and now it gives me the options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that up so that you guys can actually see it a little better. Okay, so go here. I'm going to click on my users. Now you'll see that users and groups, it didn't actually open in a new window. Up here, you can go back, right? So if I go back, it'll bring me here. And then if I'm in users and groups and I click on this little sort of waffle looking thing, it'll show all again. So there's an easy way to just sort of get back, even if you have to click the arrows left or right, whichever way you're going multiple times. So once I go into users, you'll see that I have to click this lock image to make any changes. So it's going to ask me to click the lock, and then it's going to bring up saying like, hey, this person is someone's trying to change the settings. Please put in the username and password. So like at the school, we have this where I have to go in and type in this ridiculous password so the students can never make any major changes. So once I unlock it, it does this adorable little thing of making an unlocking sound, and it actually changes the lock, okay? And then here you'll see that the current user and then other users that are on here. So there's an admin user, a guest user, login options. The plus and the minus is where you can actually add users if you want to. So you can add a user account and then you put in all of their information, as well as a password. And then you can even put in a password hint. And we're going to talk a little bit about passwords later in terms of like what's really good versus what's not so good. I can change password, login items. You can hide applications. So if you're making one for someone who's younger in your family, this is where you can start setting up, you don't want them to be on certain applications. You don't want them to go to certain websites, which is great. Sometimes the internet will be a little weird in what the security settings are, because it will say that someone can't go to a certain website when actually that website is completely okay. But there's something behind the scenes that's telling your computer like, nope, this isn't okay. So it's all about how you want to set up your security preferences. But this is a way that you can go ahead and you just add your user and then you just click the lock again. And now it has locked all the changes that you've made. All right, so back. And the same thing when you're on Windows, you have the option. That's what I was saying, when you are adding a user on a Windows operating system, it'll ask you like put in their Windows email address, which I'm not sure what, I don't know if it's Windows or Microsoft. I never use them. And it'll ask you and you can say no, and then it'll ask you again. It asks you like 2 or 3 times, but eventually you'll get to the point where you don't have to use their you don't have to set up a login for them. You can actually just use your personal email. Yes, so screen time is great on a Mac because it allows you to see how much time is being spent, what can be spent by certain, what applications can be used at certain times. And I will say that if you have a child or a preteen or tween or whatever you want to call them right now, who happens to have a phone, it's a great way to check how much time they're spending on their phone. I use that with my daughter and just explain to her like, hey, look at how much screen time you've used over just, this last week or whatever it might be. But yeah, that's a great way to keep track of all that. All right, so let's move on. We have like 2 more things to talk about. The next one is passwords. Okay, when it comes to passwords, a few things to remember. Now there are some people out there who don't believe that password 1234 is common, and you'd be surprised how many people will actually use password 1234 or add an exclamation point to the end or whatever it might be. So number 1 is to make sure that you're following whatever the website is telling you when you're setting up a login account. So I think for when you're setting up your user account, you can keep it for Windows and your operating system for Mac. You can keep it very simple. But when you're making like a Google email account, there are requirements. It has to be 8 characters long. It has to include, they'll tell you uppercase, lowercase, has to have a special character, something like has to include a number. So make sure you're following all of that. So, you're making a really strong password. If there's an option for your browser to use unique passwords, Google Chrome does this, where it will actually suggest the password, which is ridiculously long. It's uppercase, lowercase, it has all the requirements, but it's not something you'd ever come up with. And it saves it in there for you. There's also add-ons for browsers. So if you look on my browser up here, I have all of these little add-ons. So you can have an add-on for your browser that you would log into once that saves all of your passwords. But make sure, last but not least, so those add-ons, a lot of them have freemium models. And if you don't know what a freemium model is, it's basically when you sign up for something, it'll give you a certain amount for free, and then it will ask you to pay if you want. So there's one out there, Dashline, which my husband uses, and he gets like 50 passwords for free. But after that, it'll start charging like per month. So that's anytime you hear a freemium model, that's what they're talking about. And last but not least, do not use the same password for all sites. Please try and switch them up. I know a lot of us that work for like cities or government agencies. I know for the Department of Education, ours lasts for, I don't know, say like 6 months. And then they tell us, okay, time to change it, and even if you go in and just change some capitalization or whatever it might be, don't save your passwords on like a digital sticky note or on your desktop under a document that says passwords, because if someone can easily, if your computer's left open somewhere, and then they have all your passwords to whatever it might be. And there's so many different ways to save your passwords out there too. So going back to work smarter, not harder, these are keyboard shortcuts that I love, that a lot of people don't even realize how many are out there. And you can Google all of this and find more. But your basic, if you're on a Mac, you have Command, which is that little symbol there. You will find it next to your space bar. It's the first key. On any operating system like Windows, it's going to be Control. The other parts are exactly the same. When I say plus, it just means hold down Command and then press C. So that would be copy. For paste, it's Command or Control V. Cut is X. Undo is Z. Try it. If you might not think, oh, undo is not going to work here. You'd be surprised how many places where you do something, undo will work. I was working on these slides and I deleted something, Command Z, and all of a sudden it populated right back on there. I also teach kids how to code. That's like their greatest thing, because they'll delete a whole chunk of code and freak out. And I go, just hit Command Z or Control Z, and it comes right back for them. If you're on Chrome, which I suggest, it's a pretty stable browser, knock on wood, because we know that I said that now it's not going to work. If you want a new tab to open up, you have Command or Control T. And then if you want to close that window, you have Command or Control W. There are more where you can, jump from tab to tab. So if you're like going from one tab to the other, or, there's ways to group them. There's so many different things out there, all sorts of shortcuts for you. File management, really quick. It's just Finder in a Mac, and then I'm forgetting the name of it in Windows, but they're set up the same. They're set up as file trees. So if you look on the side, you'll have like your applications, your downloads, your documents, your desktop, and your iCloud drive will be there. And then the same thing on a Windows operating machine, you will also have all of that set up, as well as your OneDrive account if you're logged into that. And OneDrive has become a lot like Google Drive too, where you can do like other things like Excel and PowerPoint and so on and so forth. The number one rule that I tell everyone, just make sure that you're paying attention to where you're saving things, okay? Because you'll download something and you don't realize that you didn't save it into downloads, and now you're trying to search your computer and what did I rename it? And if you don't rename it and it's named as download 7654321, now you're searching your computer for it. So recents, things like that will help you, but it's just your basic file tree. You can make folders to sort of organize things. You can, I know in Google, I color code them. So like everything in certain folders will be of a certain topic, will have a certain color. So that's your basic file management. And yeah, work smarter, not harder. That's, if you can take one thing from this entire presentation, I hope that is it. I hope some of these have helped you. And last but not least, Google is your best friend. Don't be afraid to Google it. I didn't know a lot about PCs, so I just opened up Google and I said, how do I do this on a PC? It's just making sure to pay attention to how you word things. Try and be as specific as possible. You can never be too specific when you're trying to actually search on Google. So don't be afraid. You've seen over the last year and a half that technology is where it's going. Some people now never have to go back to the office. We're back in the building, but I still, I'm teaching my kids technology, and every student has to have technology now in case we are moved remote again. So I don't know if anybody has any questions that I didn't cover.
Yeah, Beth, we have a few. I hope
Sure.
you can see me. I'm not cutting out. Beth, Windows 10, which I know Windows slightly, but I don't know anything about Mac. And has a cut and snip. One of the best things in the world, where you've got a screen and you just want to you take that picture, you drag, you hit cut and snip and drag over it and it cuts it.
Mhm.
Does Mac have something similar? And is it only
So what I usually use is I just take a screenshot, and it's a keyboard shortcut. It is Command Shift and the number 4. And what happens is once you click on that and let go, it gets like a little crosshairs on there where you can then drag whatever it is that you want. So all of those screenshots that I took today is what I did. I had the window pop up. I did Command Shift 4, and I dragged it over exactly what I wanted. And then for me, it automatically just drops it on my desktop. So then it's there, and then I can either drag it into slides or, use it in a document if I wanted to.
I know the Mac one can do video as well. I don't know if the Windows one can.
Well, if you heard Richard, he said the Mac one may be able to do video, but he doesn't believe Windows could do video.
Oh, see, okay. I didn't know about the video part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in case you want.
I got one other one, well, actually two other ones. Beth, don't know if you run two screens. I'm glad to say, since we do plan review at the city, we have two screens, and whatever the software that allows them, where you can park on one. Best thing in the world. Best thing in the world.
Yeah. And you can, I mean, there's so many ways to do it. You could make the 2 screens that it's one giant screen, or you could make it so that, people only see one screen and then you're still working on the other screen. There's like, yeah, it's great. If you can have a 2 screen setup, it's awesome.
And then just one final comment on passwords, and know they're important, and I, like you, work for government and they mandate that you change them every 60 days or whatever it is. But you have so many different passwords, for different programs and things. I would hate to admit, because God forbid my bosses should be monitoring, but I don't use electronic sticky notes. I use real sticky notes stuck to my real office wall. But I don't know how else you can keep up. Now, Richard, the IT specialist, alluded to some software that you go through where you just have one password and then it changes all your other ones.
Yeah, there's so many out there. If you Google, password manager, there's some that you pay for. Like I said, there's some that have a freemium model where you'll get a certain amount that it'll, hold for you. Google will like auto generate passwords for you, but those other password managers will do the same thing. I know my husband uses it when he logs into Chrome. He just opens up, I think it's called Dashline, if I'm not mistaken. And he just puts in his username and password, and then whatever website he goes to, the little menu will pop up and say like, oh, you're at your bank's website, and he clicks on it and it'll automatically log in for him.
The great thing about that is you only have to remember one password that is as secure as you could possibly make it, and the other ones just are whatever they are, and you don't have to care.
Absolutely.
That's excellent, as expected. Expected nothing less, and you delivered above. So congratulations. And school starts next week for y'all?
We go in the 9th and 10th, and students up here in the north, well, at least in New York City, start on the 13th. We start very late this year.
I'm sure.
But we also go until the end of June.
Expecting no hurricane days, but there may be a few snow days in your future.
Yeah, but we don't get snow days anymore. So
you just deny it. Snow days don't exist.
Snow days become virtual at home teaching.
Ms. Beth, I won't keep you. Tell Hector hello. And again, thank you very much. There's all kinds of digital applause going on out here. So we really appreciate it. Thank you and have a great day.
Anytime. Thanks, Bill. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Speaker, yeah, Dale, there we go. This could almost be seamless.
Where is Dale?
Let's see if Dale, well, actually, you know what, Dale, if you're there, I see Mike Orphanides did sign in. Oops. What we will do, my Dale, I'm going to bring Mike on.
Sounds good.
Just click Mike Orphanides' microphone. He'll be able to present, or how?
Pass on me, I got it.
Mike Orphanides, are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Is that Mike with one eye?
There we go. Michael, you are on, and when you're done in whatever it is, 5-10 minutes, we will bring Dale on. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I don't know, for some reason, William, my video does not seem to be working, but at least you can hear me, I guess.
Yeah, you're coming through fine, and
it says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it, so maybe they don't want to show my face today. I think it's on your end, William.
Yep.
By clicking on him, no, on him in the list.
Well, it doesn't matter. I can talk. You don't need to see me. I am working from home today anyway. We did have a tree trimmer class this morning. Can you all hear me?
Yep, hear you nice.
Great. All righty. So yeah, I just wanted to make a mention that we have pretty much finished our tree trimming classes for this licensing cycle. As you well know, licenses for Broward County tree trimmer expire August 31st of every year, at least, and of course they're on a 2-year cycle, but for the folks that expire this year, they had to renew by the 31st. So it's been a pretty busy summer in that regard. I want to mention that we ran out of the laminated cards that, we put people's picture on and the date of the class, and they're good for 2 years and all of that. About almost a month ago, we've had, a lot of people through the program, and it's a global issue with these cards. They're all back ordered because they're manufactured in China. So in the interim, in case any of you guys are asking to see, asking tree services to see cards in the next couple of weeks, their best they're going to be able to produce is a paper document with basically a visual of their card, what their card would look like, but it's not on laminated plastic, it's on paper. And as soon as we get shipment in, we tried multiple vendors. Everybody said the same thing. Everything is coming from China and it's all back ordered because of the pandemic. And, schools were busy in the summer trying to get their IDs made and whatnot. Please accept the paper document. Broward County, the people that issue the licenses are more than willing to accept the paper documents. So you guys in the city should respect those as well. And just in the event that you haven't had the newest advanced class, I wanted to make a mention that we will be continuing it through next spring and then starting up with a new class. And the topic is mature tree pruning, using a combination of some materials from Dr. Ed Gilman's website, which is still up and being maintained. His replacement, Dr. Ryan Klein, is new. Ryan is a great guy. If you have not met him, he has a lot of energy and enthusiasm. I think he's going to be another Dr. Ed. So we're so pleased to have him up in Gainesville, and he's making the rounds through the state, appearing at various events as well. But our new class on mature tree pruning, well, it's not new, but we've been doing it for a year now. We will sunset that next spring and come out with a new one. But I wanted to mention that, this 25% rule, by the way, is actually no longer in effect. The ANSI standard has changed. It's gone to a more objectives-based pruning regimen, whereby you need to identify your objective and then do what pruning you need to achieve it. So it offers tree services more latitude in terms of going heavier or going lighter. And with mature trees, we probably ought to be going lighter, making smaller cuts, only cuts that really matter. That's what the class is about. The differences in species' ability to compartmentalize decay affects the size of cuts you can make. Whether you're doing canopy reductions or you're doing subordination with codominant leaders for structure, or you're shortening temporary limbs, we address limb cracks, we address lean, balancing the canopy, all that good stuff is in that class. And so you folks in the city, we'd love to have you sign up for it. If you have not, it's available on our website, the link to Eventbrite to sign up for the class. I also wanted to point out that in addition,
Mike?
Yes.
Mike, two things. One, I made you a co-host, so feel free to try your video again, and it should work.
Okay.
And you just real quick, because I heard, there you go. Hi, Michael.
There I am.
And there's the missing Picasso I heard on the news.
I better turn the video off. That's actually a scene from Italy where my family was just the last 2 weeks. We were in northern Italy and didn't realize that that's where this picture behind my head is. We've had all these years, but anyway.
Is that why my taxes are going up?
Very nice.
Had a great time. Getting back to the ANSI though, guys, I want you to know that there's another big change besides the 25% going away. There is some allowance for climbing spikes when you're pruning trees, and that may shock some of you, but essentially as it reads, and again, if you take the class, we can get into the details, but if the bark on the tree is of sufficient thickness, it is warranted, they make allowance for climbing spikes to be used on hardwood trees, not palms, but hardwood trees with thicker bark. So I'm thinking live oak, for example. But it is the ANSI, and it does change from time to time. There's a few other things which are probably significant, but less so than what I've already mentioned. In the interest of time, I won't go into those, but those are the two biggies. You can exceed the 25% or obviously go below it. It's all objective-based pruning. And in certain cases, climbing spikes may be authorized to move from tree to tree or to do pruning operations up in the canopy. And so in addition to tree trimming classes, obviously we're continuing on with our GIBMP and our pesticide applicator training and testing. We are offering testing twice a month. It's on a reservation basis. It's all on the computer, so you have to get a voucher and sign up for a Tuesday slot to take your pesticide exams. We are also contemplating, Donna and I are contemplating a landscape technician certification, which would be like a 6-session class that would cover everything from installation through maintenance. And by participating in 6 consecutive mornings, technicians or folks that are, working for primarily landscape maintenance companies or cities could obtain a certification through UF IFAS extension. So that's kind of in the works as well. Donna, I want to ask you if Donna Mike Castro, my program assistant, formerly Donna Torrey, she got married, met a wonderful guy and they changed her name. So she's now known as Donna Castro. Donna, I want to invite you to say a few things to the group today as well.
Take a second longer than you think.
Hello, everybody.
There we go. Hi, Donna Castro.
Hi.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I guess Mike pretty much wrapped it all up, but I put our emails into the chat box. If you guys have any questions, or there's a really good new document out from the Pesticide Information Office about everything you ever wanted to know about every license and how many CEUs you need and how to get the license. And they've really tried to make it easier for everyone. So, if you want that document, I'd be happy to send it to you.
And I can think of 2 more things I want to mention before we sign off here, William, and thank you, Donna. There's also now a phone app or computer app for determining what are the nutrient management restrictions, if there are any, across the state, municipality by municipality, county by county. And of course, Fort Lauderdale now has a blackout period for fertilizing landscapes and turf. And so does, this is really new, so does Hallandale Beach. It's part of their coral reef protection initiative. You have to go to the code and look that up. But for those of you that are applying for urban landscapes anywhere in the state of Florida, for that matter, this app is really cool. You can click on it on the county that the jurisdiction covers. It's all color coded. It will tell you all the specifics about their restrictions and so forth. So that's a good thing. The other thing I wanted to mention was Donna and I have been working with Way Hoyt on a primer, a fact sheet, if you will, for relocating established trees. Talks about, considerations with regard to how big the root ball should be, how much lead time you need, which I know when I worked for Davey, we were always getting requests for, to relocate trees. But we were getting them, 2 weeks before the clearing and grubbing was occurring, and you need to plan this out ahead of time. And so with Way Hoyt, Donna and I, we've worked up this little fact sheet we're going to be releasing. I actually sent it to Dr. Klein last night for his blessing and some photos. But if you have trees in your city that need to be relocated, it will help you with some guidance regarding how to plan for root pruning in advance of removal and relocation of these trees. So we hope that's going to be a help to you. That's about all I had. William, I guess unless there's any questions, I'll sign off and we'll continue on with the program.
Hey, Mike, I did have two questions about what you said. One would be on the spikes, because it's then leaving it up to the tree to determine if the bark is thick enough. So obviously we could all say if they scale a gumbo limbo, we know they're in trouble, and they may be able to scale an oak, okay, but it kind of puts a city or an enforcement officer in a bad position, because even if they scaled an oak, it's still going to scar outer bark. Who's going to make that determination whether it's, on some other tree like a tamarind? Is it damaged? Are there some parameters, or is there a list of trees? How are we going to make this call?
That's a great point. And obviously I've pondered that too, because the ANSI doesn't provide us with any details. But I guess two things. One, just on the practical standpoint, we know red maples and gumbos and ficus for that matter are very thin barked and certainly Bella, quiet, that's my dog. Are very thin barked. And so clearly I would think those would not fall within that permissible category. The other thing I would make a mention of is species that are poor compartmentalizers. We know that about ficus. We know that about red maple. We know that about Hong Kong orchid. So those would be ones I would shy away from. But your point is well taken. And maybe I'll take that up with Dr. Klein to see if he has any additional thoughts on that. It's a great question. And, I know in the field we'll be dealing with it.
Yeah, trying to always avoid conflict, and it never works out well when somebody says, oh, the county allowed it. Well, even though you write in, though, you're saying it is allowed when, of course, sometimes people only hear it is allowed, and that's what draws it a little bit of a conflict. The other one, Mike, you said about the degree can then be used to determine the size of the cut or the amount of material removed.
Okay, I think in part of your comment, your question cut out, William, but based upon, yes, in the class we discuss for reduction cuts. Okay, so we're talking about canopy reductions, or we're talking about subordinating codominant leaders, shortening them. I think the recommendation is to go 1 to 3 inches on poor compartmentalizing species, as some of the ones I've just described, no larger because of the concern about decay. Anytime you make a cut, whether it's a good cut or a poor cut, you're going to get some decay. The idea is if you make a good cut, you'll get less of it. And if you have a good compartmentalizing species, which again, if you're not familiar with that term, it means how the tree can wall off decay in its woody tissues. Some of them do it better than others. It's a species thing. It's also an age thing and a condition thing. Younger trees, healthier trees, and trees that are genetically predispositioned to compartmentalize decay will perform a lot better, and you can make bigger cuts on them upwards of 6 inches in diameter or possibly more. Again, take the class. We really recommend it. So we're all on the same page. Thanks.
All right, Mike, one last one, then I promise to let you go. We got a question from Gerald. I hope I'm not breaking up, but he's saying, are there any short tree trimmer courses for property managers?
I think my dog wants more lunch. I'm sorry, I missed that, William.
Okay, Gerald was asking, do you have scheduled any tree trimmer classes for property managers?
Property managers, residents, anybody who's interested is more than welcome to attend any of our classes. We had a master gardener in the class this morning, I know. I also want to make a mention that, we are available to do city-specific trainings. We've done those in the past for Plantation and Oakland Park and Hollywood. We literally bring the class to them. I would prefer to wait until COVID quiets down a little bit more. And some of the graphs I've been looking at suggest that will be happening later this fall. Right this moment, we actually are still doing everything in person, even though we have played around with some small in-person classes this summer. But once Delta got going, we kind of backed off on that. But long story short, anyone is welcome to any of our classes that we advertise online through our website.
Thank you, Michael. All right, I will let you go, and we're going to call on our next speaker. So,
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, Mike. Richard, do you want Dale on? Dale, they're going to call you up. And I'm going to introduce Dale, who was good enough to step in. If you all remember, a couple years ago, we had Dr. Wheeler talk, like days before they did a release of thrips for control on Florida hollies. And as I was driving down the Sawgrass, I was telling Dale this yesterday, for the past 9 months, I've been noticing that there were some trees under stress out on the Everglades side. And it got me thinking, if this were indeed those thrips coming to work, are working out, I should say. So I reached out to Dr. Wheeler, and Dr. Wheeler very nicely volunteered Dale to come in and speak, since he indicated that Dale had taken over the program for the past 4 years. So Dale is a postdoctorate research entomologist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Research Services, and has taught entomology for graduates and undergraduates at the University of Florida in the past. So Dale, we thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
All righty. Can everyone hear me all right? My sound coming through okay?
Your sound and video, or your sound and picture is great.
All right, let me pull up the PowerPoint then. All righty, so yeah, as William mentioned, Greg Wheeler spoke last, and at that time, we had just gotten approval to release the biological control agents. And then Greg and his lab, and then Min Rayamaji, my supervisor, and our lab were both kind of working together on a bunch of different projects to look at ways to improve how we mass rear the thrips, how to release them, and ways to monitor their impact. So the things I'll talk about today cover mostly the work that's being done at the Invasive Plant Research Lab under Min Rayamaji or Greg Wheeler's team, and I'll be sure to point out those. And also at the very end, if there's any questions, just email them to me. And if it's not something that I'm working on directly, I'll be able to forward you over to Greg or Min, or even we're all working closely with the University of Florida. Greg has a U.S. Air Force grant that he's working on with Dr. Carrie Mintier at the University of Florida. We're also working with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services on producing thrips. And we've kind of divided up the state into different regions where we focus our release efforts and research on, but we do have some overlap, and we are collaborating on a few of those projects. So, put my name on the title slide here, but also Min and Greg, as these are also their projects. And let's get started. So as I go through, I'll kind of go through sections on the projects, and then I'll take a pause and see if anyone's posted anything in the Q&A or the chat. We can discuss those then. If not, I'm sure questions will kind of come up as things marinate, and we'll have some time at the end to go over those. So right now, just a brief overview of the invasive plant. Shinus terebinthifolia is the Latin name for Brazilian pepper tree or Florida holly. Has a few common names. And in the 1840s, it was brought over here as an ornamental plant because of its beautiful foliage. And then in the winter, all of those red berries, botanically they're called drupes. And for about 100 years, it wasn't a big problem. And then once it got a liking to natural areas and unmanaged areas, it just took off. And now it's covering most of peninsular Florida in areas that don't get hard freezes. It's got over 700,000 acres of coverage now. This map here is from EdMaps, which you can go to look for a variety of invasive plants. And it shows, I put it down to the county resolution here. And this says it was October 2020, but I checked. I didn't have time to put a new map in, but it's still the same, at least in the Florida and the Southeast. But Brazilian pepper tree is a huge problem in Hawaii. It's in coastal Southern California, where I grew up. It's also in Australia. We're actually starting to work with the Australians on that as well. And it's an expensive weed to control. It's a large woody plant, and it grows very quickly. It reproduces prolifically, and it easily just chokes out native vegetation. And even just, probably on your drive home today, if you're in the office working, or you go out to the store, you look in almost any landscaping, and you'll probably see one peeking through the intentionally planted hedges there. It really finds its way into everything. And so, before biocontrol, it's very costly to control with herbicide or mechanical removal. and it has to be somewhere you can get people and machinery to. So these are a little bit old, these figures here on prices, but over $1 million annually spent by some municipalities. And the Brazilian pepper tree is one of the SERP priorities, and that's the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. And it's like the largest ecological restoration plan in Florida at the moment, aiming to restore the Everglades back to its original flow and ecosystem parameters. And Brazilian pepper tree, along with a lot of others, Melaleuca, you've probably heard of, Old World Climbing Fern, they're all high priority targets to get under control in this area. So that's where my funding comes from, is the SERP program. So as we talked about earlier, we have the release of the biological control agents, which was approved in May 2019. So we've had a few years now since those have been allowed out of quarantine. And for the talk today, I'm only going to be talking about the thrips here, Pseudophyllothrips itchini. And the other species, it's related to psyllids, Calophyllata. That one had some issues in the quarantine colony where they had a die-off, and because of COVID, they haven't been able to get back to Brazil, which is where both of these insects were collected from. So those, the Calophylla is still kind of on hold, but eventually, once those colonies are back up, they have to get screened for parasitoids. You bring the insect over, you want to make sure you're just bringing the insect and none of its little hitchhikers that may be inside. But the thrips are here and they're doing well and they're out, as you guys will see in a moment. And so I'll go into the life cycle of the thrips for a bit. They're very tiny. The adults are only about 2.5 millimeters. So you can imagine the eggs, they're pretty small, about 0.5 millimeter or less. And you can't really see them with the naked eye, but if you have one of those little inspector loops, you can look. The eggs are found on the new flushing tips. They kind of wedge them into cracks in the buds or in the leaf axils, and some of the leaves, the rachis between the leaflets has like a little channel depression, kind of like a celery stalk, and they'll lay their eggs into that. In a few days, the eggs hatch, and you get 2 larval feeding stages, and these guys are bright orange. The ones in these photos, I think, were photographed dead because this was when they were back in quarantine. We couldn't get the camera equipment in, so they had to be frozen and brought out to photograph. And then after the thrips are done feeding, which in the next slide I'll show the damage, they descend to the soil in leaf litter to pupate, and they have 3 non-feeding pupal stages. And then the adults emerge, and the adults have wings, and they're able to fly. But as we'll see in a little bit, they don't go very far. Imagine you're 2.5 millimeters. You're not a very strong flyer. And then the adults will be feeding as well. And so here I've got a picture. This is what we typically see in our lab colonies, where we have a huge density of first and second instar larvae. And then there's an adult right there that join the larvae afterwards. So you could have multiple overlapping generations, and they feed gregariously, which means together. And they target the new herbaceous growth. They will go on to the parts of the stems that start to become woody, but that's only when they've run out of options. And in the wild, they would disperse, but in captivity, they have no choice. The adults will also aggregate after they emerge. Greg Wheeler's been looking into the pheromones, the chemicals they produce that allow them to recognize each other and aggregate together. So this is kind of what you'd more see in the field if you went to a release site and there was a recent emergence of adults. They'll aggregate under a leaf like that for a day or two. They'll mate, and then they start to find food, flushing leaf tips. So I guess pause there. And are there any, have any questions popped up, William?
Yes, there is one. You just alluded to the fact that in captivity, they don't disperse. By captivity, were you meaning lab, or have you all modified the thrip that it does not disperse even once released?
So that's a good question. So we haven't done any kind of selection on these thrips or any CRISPR or anything like that. They're still the original genotype collected in Brazil, but I do mean in captivity, they're in cages. So we keep them in cages. I'll get into that in another slide or two. But to keep predators out and to keep them from dispersing, because we want to keep them concentrated so we can gather them easily to release into the field. So once they're in the field, they can disperse and go wherever they choose. But I'll look at some of our preliminary findings on what they've chosen to do, at least at one site. Any other questions on that?
That's it. Thank you.
All righty. So once we start getting these thrips more distributed throughout the state, you're probably going to start seeing the damage. It could be that the damage that was mentioned on the Sawgrass Expressway could be thrips. I'd have to check our GPS coordinates on our releases to see if we've done anything there. I don't think my team has, but it could be. But in the laboratory, on this picture on the right, we'll see like greater than half the plant, and in some cases in the scientific literature, it's been reported up to 80% damage on these plants, where the thrips will feed in those groups, and they have piercing mouth parts that pierce into the stem, the cells. They rupture the cells and they draw the fluids up, and then this causes in the stem tips this necrosis where it withers and turns black. And then with wind and rain, after a while, that tip will snap off, and then it's kind of hard to tell what killed it after that point. In the new infestations too, you'll see fresh leaf damage. So they like to get to the succulent new growth, and in the field we more frequently see the aggregations, smaller aggregations, and they're on the undersides of the leaves, kind of tucked in between the mid ribs and the main rib. And again, these will feed, and if enough of them feed, the leaf will curl and turn black. But in most cases in the field, the densities of thrips are still low enough to where the leaf survives, and the individual leaflets will get this crinkled appearance. And this is the most common damage we've seen so far in the field. So this will have implications for the plant's vigor still, in that with the pleated leaves, the patches of necrosis, there's less efficient photosynthesis going on. But that'll be the topic of longer term studies. Because these are long-lived woody species, we're going to need some time to see impact, as opposed to if we were trying to, if Brazilian pepper were like an annual, we'd see pretty immediate impacts. So just wanted to point out, these are the three types of damage. So in the field, we look for the signs, do we see the thrips there, and then the symptoms, the type of damage on those. So the dying tips, if there's a dense enough aggregation of thrips, or if it was a small enough tip, and then the old crinkled leaves, which could hang on to a plant months after the damage has occurred, and that's by far what we see most. So we still haven't yet seen damage on the scale that we see in the lab, but that's because we have in these cages up to 30,000 thrips feeding, whereas in the wild they have space to spread out, and there's also natural enemies that will prey upon the thrips. So what we see in the lab doesn't always match what we see in the field, and that's why we have to evaluate and determine what kind of impacts they're going to have. And I should mention, with biological control, for those of you not familiar, the goal is not to release these thrips and then they completely wipe out Brazilian pepper tree. The goal is management, to get these plants to be less vigorous, less able to reproduce, and allow native species a chance to compete, and also help facilitate the control methods that we already have in kind of an integrative approach. So I just wanted to clarify that. And of course, I could answer other questions that might pop up about biocontrol as we go or towards the end. All right, any questions on damage?
Yeah, maybe, yes, it kind of alludes to it. We had a question from Richard Field, and he was asking, are the thrips staying only on the peppers, or have they been noted moving to other trees?
So that's a great question. I do have a slide in a little bit. The short answer is, they've been tested in quarantine on every possible related species in the Anacardiaceae, which obviously it includes poison ivy, mango, pistachio, sumac. So we've tested all kinds of different plants, and the thrips are not able to survive on those. So once the Brazilian pepper tree, in theory, like if the thrips were introduced to a plot and all the Brazilian pepper tree were killed, the thrips would either have to disperse to new Brazilian pepper tree or the population would starve and die out. So these insects, they're very safe and they're only feeding on the Brazilian pepper.
Very good. The other one I think I'll hold because as you and I spoke, are you going to talk about the program where cities can apply for releases later?
Yes, I can actually, I'll be able to post a link in the chat. Might have to do that after I stop sharing the screen, but on our website, if you just Google Invasive Plant Research Laboratory, our website should be the first one that comes up. And then there's like a home screen banner where pictures kind of circulate through, and you wait for the Brazilian pepper tree one, you click that, and then there's a link for the application. So as of now, we're only doing releases on public lands. So like city parks, county parks. We haven't gotten to state parks yet, because we have to, it depends on the park. They might require permits, but we do, I'll get to releases in a little bit, but we have done in Big Cypress and Everglades. But
Good,
yeah, I could
because-
post that link at the end.
It's good because there was a carpool forming of people going to hunt down the trees and relocate your thrips. So
Gotcha. Yeah, they don't seem to move too far, but we're still waiting on some formal studies on dispersal, but I'll provide a little bit of info on that in a little bit. Okay, so I'll go over our rearing procedure if those curious on how we release thousands of these insects. So before May 2019, they were in our quarantine facilities, which is just a laboratory room in a very expensive building designed to withstand, I think it's a Cat 2 or Cat 3 hurricane. And so yeah, the insects can't get out. We don't have a lot of space. So they were reared in these acrylic cylinders, which are about 45 centimeters tall. So not very big at all. They fit on a bench top pretty easily. And we found that those on average, if we put 20 to 50 adult thrips in, we get on average about 370 thrips out each generation. So we decided, okay, let's try using larger cages. Maybe we can get more efficiency, greater numbers of thrips with less work. We tried acrylic boxes, which everything on this slide is proportional in size, but that still, we put 100 thrips in. So we got about 680 out. So still roughly similar thrips in versus thrips out ratios. And then we just went big, go big or go home. This was based on rearing a psyllid for Melaleuca a few years ago, where we used these large screen cages. And these are 1.8 meter cubes. So, you could walk into them, you undo the zipper, and we put larger plants in these. And then we would put 1,500 thrips in and get 13,000 on average, but in some cases up to 30,000 in one generation out of these cages. Again, a sort of similar thrips in, thrips out, but the key difference here was the labor required. So a tenth of the labor required, between putting the plants in, watering them, collecting the thrips. So only a half hour per 1,000 thrips out of these screen cages, which was a huge help in our mass rearing. And because they're out of quarantine, we have room for, a 6 foot or 6 foot cube cage. We have a whole screen house full of these outside. And this was actually, this will be published very soon. It's currently in press that outlines the whole procedure that we developed here. So this has really allowed us to go from the quarantine step of biocontrol after the agent's been tested and approved by APHIS, the Animal Plant and Health Inspection Service, and it's gone through all kinds of other city and government agencies to weigh in on the safety of this. It's out, and then our next task, make as many of these insects as we can, and then get them distributed into the field. So here is the latest on our release statistics. And earlier I had mentioned this, this is a collaborative effort. This isn't just us at the IPRL. It's also the University of Florida has a rearing operation, as well as FDACS up in Gainesville. And we all kind of do slightly different variants on rearing, but the screen cages do seem to be the way to go for numbers. So as of that first release in May, after we got approval, we've released well over 1.5 million thrips, and at 821 release sites in Florida. And this map here is not the most updated, but it gives you a general sense of the spread, because a lot of these sites we return to for repeated releases. So we're working on trying to see how many releases we need to get them established, as well as how many thrips per release. And so I believe the University of Florida is doing a formal study on that, and we're looking forward to getting the output from that. And this is spread across 25 counties. And like I said, we kind of, those 3 agencies listed, we kind of try to split up Florida geographically to cover the area. And so in this graph kind of shows, that blue arrow is when we first started to develop those large screen cages as a method. And you can see the noticeable increase in monthly thrips release. And some of those spikes and drops are due to, we have seasonal changes in the plant sometimes. COVID has also certainly been a hindrance for us as well. If we're down a few people, where we have tighter restrictions on what we can do in person, our numbers kind of dropped to reflect that. So we're well on our way to getting these thrips out. And as mentioned earlier, we do have a link on our website that I'll paste at the end, that you could request thrips release if, say, you manage, or someone who manages like a park or something like that. And again, we're only doing public lands for now. So I think I'm seeing the Q&A flashing red, and I could take a break here to answer some questions.
Okay, the one, let's see, 2 actually. I was writing one too. When you and I talked yesterday, the doctor I was trying to think of was Dr. Ellen Lake. She had done work on the air potato, and and Greg Palladora chimed in on something similar. He said, if I recall, when biocontrol was released for air potato, it was recommended to follow up with a herbicide application to accelerate or guarantee the kill on the plant. In the preliminary data, does it look like the thrips will do enough damage on their own to kill the plant on their own, or would it be better to follow up with an herbicide?
So I know that some of there's grad students at UF in Fort Pierce that are working with like an integrated approach with herbicide. I don't know how those projects have progressed. I don't think that they've finished up just quite yet. So I can't, put an exact answer on that. But the idea is that the thrips would definitely help to manage those plants in addition to traditional techniques. We've definitely gone through areas on our way to our field sites that had been herbicided, and the Brazilian peppers all, shriveled and, wiped out from that, but not completely, because the plant will resprout from, thicker woody sections. So one of the ideas is that the thrips are going to come in and attack that new flushing growth. But I don't think we're going for, a total kill here with the biological control agents. It's, like I said earlier, more of an integrative approach where the thrips would help out. Another idea is if the thrips, they seem to attack the saplings in our garden plot. We have a lot of our saplings are in pretty bad shape, likely due to the thrips. So, if larger plants are removed, that seed bank, as it regrows, the thrips could come in and have mortality on those seedlings. but we have to do some more formal studies on that. Right now, it's just kind of an observational thing in our garden plot.
We also had a question from Joshua. How were the release?
What, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Chosen?
How are the release sites chosen?
Yes.
Okay, so we work, the South Florida Water Management District is one of the funding partners under the SERP program that I mentioned earlier, and the Army Corps of Engineers. So they manage large areas, and they provide us like, hey, this looks like a good site with Brazilian pepper tree. We also recently met with Everglades, and they showed us some of their sites. So we're working on the permit now to do the release there. And then also county parks, like areas that we've seen, we know, we'll reach out to them and see, hey, are you interested in having the thrips? And we've also had requests come in initially when the permit was out. So we've been trying to address those and get to those areas. And also areas that we notice too as we're driving to field sites. Because like I said, this stuff, you guys know it pops up everywhere. So if we see an area that looks promising, we'll find out who manages it and get in touch with them.
Thank you.
All righty, so moving on. So we develop the agents, we test them in quarantine. That's what I mean by develop. We test them, make sure they're safe. We get the approval, we mass produce them, we release them. So one of the things we need to do is monitor the agents to see if they're establishing. And the other things we do, I'll talk about, is we evaluate the impact they have directly on the plant, but also the indirect impacts they could have on the ecosystem. So how does reducing pepper tree vigor and canopy density allow understory natives to come up? And also, you're adding an insect to an ecosystem. How is that going to affect the food chain in that ecosystem? So I'll get to those. For now, we'll go over monitoring. So with insects that feed on plants, a very highly sophisticated, elegant technique is called the beat sheet method, where you literally take a PVC pipe or stick, you beat the crap out of the foliage, and then whatever insect is walking on that foliage would be dislodged and falls onto a white sheet. And then you look at it, you do your survey, or you vacuum them up, take them to the lab, analyze them later. We could also do visual surveys where we eventually become trained on where to look. We know which growing tips are likely to have the thrips. You see the damage, you go there and look. And so we spent about a year comparing these two techniques. We found that the visual surveys are most effective at detecting the thrips. And then times when the thrips showed up on the sheet, but we didn't see them, was very small compared to the times we would beat the plant, nothing on the sheet, and see them on the plant. So either they held on really well, or we just happened to not hit that branch that they were on. So those are what we've been doing now to kind of monitor their populations. But Greg Wheeler and his team are working on some other methods that could be added in. A lot of times monitoring insects, either beneficials or pests, you put out sticky cards that are very reflective. Blue and yellow tend to be the colors that attract a lot of insects. And so between blue and yellow cards, Greg found that the blue cards had trended to have more of our thrips attracted to them. And he also looked at their chemistry. So the chemicals they produce for communication, pheromones, he identified those and was making mixtures of them to see if thrips would be attracted, and it's looking promising that the thrips are attracted to these. So the implication here would be to have sticky cards baited with the pheromone to put out at release sites as a way to passively sample these. You collect the card and then you can count the number of thrips you see in a certain number of days as a way to monitor. So these are all ways we're kind of developing for monitoring. Now most people aren't going to be able to get their hands on a pheromone lure sticky card, at least not initially. So visual observation. And we're working on a little brochure actually that hopefully will get out soon that can be made available as well. That has sort of like a little field guide to what the thrips look like, their aggregations and their damage. So really visual is kind of the way we've been going lately with one of our projects. And this is just an aerial image of one of our sites that we kind of were looking at monitoring them for dispersal. And this is part of another project, which I'll talk about later. We tend to do that a lot where we kind of use the site for multiple projects. But these stars are release points that we've been doing since February 2019. We've been releasing them here, and they're about 100 meters apart. And every time we visit once a month, we measure, we survey the plants at 5-meter increments out from the release point. And we found that it was very preliminary that the thrips move about 35 meters in a year. So like I said, they have wings, they can fly, but they're not very strong flyers. And that's just what we've seen at this site. But dispersal is a very complicated thing with insects, and it depends on a huge variety of factors. The spacing of the plants. If the plants are spaced out and they're on one plant and they kill off the new tips on that plant, they're more likely to move farther to find another plant, versus if it's a continuous hedge, they just kind of move as they need to, a bit slower. And there's been some research with biocontrol done on that. So this site here is more or less a pretty continuous hedge. So that could explain why we've seen slow movement. But it's also the quality of the plants. We've seen at release sites where, one plant is just hammered by the thrips, and a plant 2 feet away from it's untouched. So there could be different, the soil underneath one of the plants could have different nutrients in it, could be getting less, more water. There's just a lot of variables at play. The exposure, so an isolated plant, in the sun and wind might not be as favorable as a plant growing under like a live oak that has a little more protection. Wind also could play a role. So this site here is pretty shaded or sheltered from the wind, but plants downwind of the thrips could see more dispersal than plants upwind. Predation pressure, so we found some predators we'll go over, as well as the thrips densities. When they're very dense, you tend to get dispersal that way, versus when they're not very dense, they won't disperse that far. So it's very complicated. It's still in the very, very early stages of that. And we'll be working on some formal studies to kind of quantify dispersal in the future. So the next thing we look at are direct impact. So how the insect is impacting its intended target, which is the Brazilian pepper tree. And so this is, I mentioned that garden plot where we planted saplings that were, about 30 centimeters tall, starting in October 2018. We let that plot grow for 2 years. And then we added the thrips shortly after we got that permit in May. The thrips were released in the plot in June. And then we tried to space it out every 1 to 2 months of just continuously releasing thrips out there. And so one of the things we measured was the percentage of dead tips that we see on these plants. Now, you guys know plants will grow, and if for whatever reason a branch may die or a stem tip may die, so we saw that background of dead tips in the plants. But notice how once we start adding the thrips, the percentage of dead tips nearly doubles and almost more than triples over time as these thrips become established. And we verified, that those dead tips, are being caused by the thrips, because we conducted surveys and we see the thrips mortality on those plants. So it's certainly looking promising in this garden plot, but we've continuously released thrips out there to put high pressure on those plants to see what kind of damage the thrips can do. And I'd mentioned in captivity, very high damage. In the wild, it's a little more variable. And a lot of it depends on the density of the thrips that are on these plants. I see some questions blinking. Take a pause to discuss those.
The question this time is, how many years before a population is considered to be self-sustaining?
That's an excellent question. And we've been a bit cautious on, declaring the thrips are established at this site. And I don't, as far as I know, we don't have anything published yet to declare them established. But in general, what we've tried to do is release once at a site and then maybe hold off on that for a year. And there are sites that we've made a release at, and a year later, the thrips are still found. And something I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about their life cycle is the time. So they go from egg to adult in roughly a month. So in that year, we've gone through 12 cycles and we haven't added any more thrips. So, it's looking very promising that, at that site, we could say that they are established. But, releasing them and then checking 3 months later, it's hard to say if, even though they've reproduced on their own, you need to look at the population trend, over a longer scale, because insects and really, most things, they go through population cycles. And if, you get too low and it crashes, then the population is what we call extirpated. So that population's gone. So I think we might, be a little cautious on that still for a while to, declare them established, but it's looking like, it's looking promising that they're holding on at some of these sites. And again, I said it depends on the site. Some sites we release and they just don't seem to do well. Other sites, they're just thriving. And even within a site, one plant we flagged always has thrips with damage, and another plant that's flagged doesn't seem to keep the thrips. Any other questions?
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. So we went from testing the damage in laboratory and cages, garden plot, and we want to scale this up even bigger. So we've been working on this study in Big Cypress, where we have 3 sites, and the University of Florida collaborates with us on this, and they had 2 sites to start, but they had to not use one of the sites. That's why I've got 3, 4, and 5 instead of 1, 2, and 3. They had 1 and 2. And each of these sites, we picked out 30 plants. We flagged them along a 200-meter transect. And what we did is, this was another one of those projects that we did multiple studies at. And so one of the things we did here is we would go and survey those plants for those 3 different damage types I mentioned earlier. And so first what we would do is look at the canopy and holistically, all right, we see all this thrips damage. We're going to give it a score out of 10. So 10 meaning 100% of the canopy has thrips damage seen across it, and 0, obviously none. And so at this site, we found, roughly averaging about 30 to 40% of those tree canopies were having thrips damage on them. And then those little pie charts there just show you, of the damage we saw, what's the breakdown of those 3 different symptoms that we see. And most of it, like I'd said, is those crinkled leaves that remain with, if the thrips don't kill off the tip or kill the new leaf, the leaves survive, but they remain on the plant very crinkled. And that's like the most obvious thing that we've seen out there. So again, from lab conditions, no predators, everything's hunky-dory, these thrips are thriving, really destroy these plants. But as you move out into the wild, things get more complicated. There's a lot more variables at play that we can't control, we can't keep predators off. So we see a lot more variability in our damage. But again, like I said, some of these plants out there, up there at like 80% damage, and a lot of plants are at 0. So one of the future things we're looking at is, considering the chemistry of the plants, where they're growing, the soil type, all these other variables, and of course predators, which we'll talk about a little bit. So earlier we had a question about, what will these thrips switch on to other plants? So we've shown that they don't in the lab. And one thing we do in biocontrol is we want to verify this, in the field. If we start to see that, oh, we're not seeing what we see in the lab in the field, then we have to kind of reevaluate how biocontrol is done. But this is sort of a check process here. And we tested this with, this was done with University of Florida, so not at IPRL specifically. this was with our collaborators. They put thrips on a few relatives of Brazilian pepper tree and then measured the thrips presence over time. And then that arrow there shows where they basically cut the Brazilian pepper tree, killed it off. And those thrips that were on the pepper tree did not move onto the neighboring plants in that little setup there. And after 12 days, none of the thrips were surviving on those non-native plants, which affirms what we've seen in the lab. It confirms that the thrips are safe and the methods that have been gone through are still working well. So another, I mentioned indirect impacts. So what the plant community, how that's going to be impacted after the thrips start to defoliate, the canopy, more light comes through, and the plants in the understory have a chance at competing again. And so this is that plot I again mentioned. Down here we've laid out transects where we're going to look at over time, take surveys of native plants that germinate, as well as litter fall from the canopy. So we have, the proof, okay, these are thrips damaged leaves that are coming down, opening up the canopy. And the plan is for this to be a 5-year study. We are going to eventually get 3 sites. We have one north of Lake Okeechobee on the Kissimmee River, and we're looking at putting some other sites, and these are just getting started. So this will be a long-term impact on how the thrips reducing Brazilian pepper tree indirectly helps out the native ecosystem. And another indirect impact I mentioned is you put thrips into an ecosystem where there's already insects. So we kind of, again, piggybacked on these big cypress plots to survey for ants, because ants are good bioindicators, meaning that they're good kind of ambassadors for the insect diversity that's out there. We did the beat sheet method, and we ended up collecting 28 species of ants in big cypress, a bit of a mixture between non-native and native species. And then these are the 5 ant families. If there's any ant geeks out there, you I'm sure would appreciate this. We have a lot of our native twig ants out there that we thought would be predators of the thrips. And so first question was, adding thrips, are we going to start messing with our native insect communities? And this is just 1 year where before release, we measured community richness, which richness basically takes into account the number of species and the number of individuals in each species. So the closer on this, the Simpson index, the closer to 1, the more diverse the ecosystem is. So the more balanced, equal number of species, and closer to 0 is the less diverse. So overall, we ran statistics on these comparing the year before thrips to the year after thrips, and there wasn't a significant difference in diversity. And for the green and yellow side, you can see that there pretty much diversity remains unchanged. But the blue site, we have some dips, and that was because this one species of ant really explodes every once in a while. But this is still early within a year. Like I said, populations take a few years to kind of establish and get the dynamics smoothed out. So this will be something of a future study here. Let me just see, let me go over this and then we'll pause for some questions because I know we're getting towards the end. So, on the flip side of the thrips impacting the ant populations, basically by being a new food source, we're kind of thinking that, okay, the thrips aren't getting to the numbers that we see in the lab. Could it be the other way around, where the ants are preying on the thrips? So that's future study. And another thing is other predators in the environment impacting the thrips. So this is a funny case of biocontrol bites biocontrol, which was a phrase that Greg suggested for a paper that we're going to write up on this. It's a species of pirate bug that was brought in from the Philippines to control the Cuban laurel thrips, which feeds on ficus species. And so these pirate bugs were never intentionally introduced to Florida. They made their way over here somehow, but they were introduced to Bermuda and I believe Hawaii for the control of these other thrips that are closely related to our thrips. Well, it turns out we've been starting to see more and more instances of these pirate bugs attacking our thrips. So in these 2 pictures, you can see a thrips harpooned on the pirate bug's rostrum, it's piercing mouth part, and here's a pirate bug nymph that's harpooned another adult. So this is something we need to keep an eye out for. It could be we want to avoid releasing thrips at sites where these pirate bugs are particularly abundant. And we also have a hard time keeping them out of our rearing cages, because once they get in, they're basically, you know, in a endless buffet, if you will. So we have to keep an eye out. So we'll take a pause for questions, and then we may be running out of time here.
Yeah, we're getting close. One quick question. They were asking if you're evaluating the reduction in blooming on the plants that are under attack by the thrips.
Yeah, that is a great question. Let me, I got 2 more slides here. So that's one of the projects that Greg Wheeler's team is working on right now. They were looking at choice tests in lab experiments. So they were giving the thrips male flowers, female flowers, green fruit, red fruit, to look at the preferences that the thrips have on these. And we have seen thrips feeding on the new flower stalks as well as the fruits, because at that time of year, the plants switch their metabolic strategy. So they're no longer pumping energy into that flush. They change it to reproductive tissue. So the flush becomes less nutritious, which was another study Greg did, looking at the nitrogen content of the flushing tips versus non-flushing tips. So there is some evidence that they are going to be feeding on those flowers and on that fruit. We still have to do, some more like field testing to see if that's going to impact the reproductive potential of the plants. And in that garden plot I mentioned earlier, we're still going through the data on the fruit production from those plants. We didn't actually measure thrips directly feeding on them, but we're kind of trying to indirectly gauge, did the plants per capita, like per size output of fruit drop after the thrips were putting pressure on it. So yeah, this is the study I just mentioned that Greg's working on too, with pruning the plants. So like I said, in the fall and winter, the plants aren't flushing as much, but by pruning the sites, like especially if you want to have a site kind of be a thrips stronghold that then they can spread out from. If you prune them in the off season, it will encourage new flush when the plant normally wouldn't, and that would to help the thrips to remain established. So this is definitely something we want to keep looking into, and this is a paper that Greg's going to be publishing here in a bit. So I think we're about to the end there, and that's essentially the end of my talk. Some of the future directions, working on, Greg's team's also working on with us on this ant study, and they're going to look into doing DNA analysis from the predators to see if we can identify thrips DNA in their guts to show that they've been eating the thrips. And we talked about integrated pest management with herbicide. There's future studies with that. I mentioned the optimum release, and then we just covered reproduction. I just want to make sure we acknowledge our funding sources, the SERP, which is Army Corps and South Florida Water Management. We have grants with FWC, Greg and Carrie Montier UF with the Air Force grant. We have a Miami-Dade County grant. We're also working with NRCS, and University of Florida has worked with the Cattlemen's Fund. So I'll stop there. I know we're just about out of time. Can handle any other questions. And,
Oh, Dale, that was excellent. That was excellent. You're right. We're right against the clock, but that's fine. It helps close the circle because we had Greg on, like I said, I think it was within a month of the actual early release. So it's really good to get this update provided by you in such a professional manner. Welcome to South Florida and welcome to the green industry down here. Landscape inspectors, if we can ever do anything for you, we would certainly, we'd be some boots on the ground to keep an eye out for them. Is there a site where if people wanted to go just kind of see where they're active, is Treetops Park still a place we can find them?
Yeah, we've been releasing them at Treetops, and usually when we go to these sites, we're trying to get out to as many spots as possible. So we pick areas that are pretty easy to access. So you'll probably be able to find some of the plants there that we've released at and see the damage. Trying to think of some other places we've released. It's Kendall Indian Hammocks we've released there for people down farther south. Trying to think where else is like an easy place, because a lot of the places in Big Cypress you can get to, but you have to hike in, or areas that are like fenced off. Along Highway 27, heading down towards Chrome Avenue, a lot of those plants in there, we've done releases. The rest stop on I-75, I forget what mile marker it's at, but it's before you get to the Miccosukee Service Plaza. It's one of the big rest stops where you can like go under the bridge on one side. We've just done some releases there. So those are some of the areas that people can look and see, if they want to see what the damage looks like. And again, I'd mentioned we'll be working on a brochure too to make available.
When that brochure is published, please make sure you reach out to us so we can provide the information or a link to our membership.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that'll be. I'll definitely make sure you guys get on the list. So I'll stop my screen share there so I can put in the link for that public request form there. So yeah, I'd be any other questions if you have any time.
I think you've done it. I think, like I said, mostly people are interested in seeing some of it and maybe pulling some in their pocket and bringing them to their local Florida holly and watch them take care of a holly population.
Yeah, we hope they do that. Hope they get around.
And Dale, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and membership does well. Have a great day.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. To the general membership population, don't quite go yet. Quickly go. I want to make a very fast. I'm looking for you, Greg. There you go. I'm going to make Greg Paladura a co-host real quickly because Greg has an announcement. Greg, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me, Bill?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So some of you may or may not know on the call, I had been working for Florida Power and Light for about the last 15 years, various roles in the vegetation management group, arborist, utility arborist. We've changed titles several times. I've worked in Dade, Broward, Palm Beach. Short story, I left the company about 6 weeks ago, and I accepted a position in the city of Boca Raton as the senior environmental officer. So some of you may have known Nora Fosman up here. She retired about 2 months ago. So I have assumed her role, got some big shoes to fill up here, and looking to get plugged back in with landscape inspectors as much as possible. I am in Palm Beach County, obviously, but still plugged in here with the Broward chapter. So looking forward to working with everybody in this capacity. Thanks, Bill.
Congratulations, Greg. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So there's a lot of changes going on for the green industry on a lot of fronts. I want to keep you all. Have a great month. Please, the last Thursday of every month is when our meetings are. So please keep an eye out on the website. Sign up as soon as you can. And it's good to see you. Have a great month. Be safe. And we will see you next month. Take care.